Yeah, feeling good on a Wednesday.
When I first saw you, I got excited. Tried to keep my composure, trying to hide it, but I didn't know. I didn't let go.
So today we're going to talk about the Champions League. We just got done with match week 4 of the Champions League group stages. Just finished watching my favorite team in the world, Chelsea, throw away an easy opportunity to win at Maribor from Slovenia. And anytime your team has a chance to win at Slovenia and at a team in Slovenia and they don't do it, you feel a bit disappointed. So forgive me if I'm a bit solemn throughout this, but I guess the first group we're going to go through is Group A, which is made up of Athletico Madrid, Olympiacos, Juventus, and Malmo from Sweden. And I mean, so far it's a pretty close group. Atletico, after 4 games played, have won 3 of their games and lost 1. They're sitting on 9 points. Olympiacos are sitting on 6. Juventus, surprisingly, have lost 2 matches, and they're sitting on 6 also. And then Malmo are sitting on 3. So they technically have a chance to go through, but it's looking like a clear 3-horse race here.
Yeah, looking at Atletico Madrid, coming off last year, they were so close to getting their goal of winning Champions League. It's got to suck that they got to work all the way back there now. Fortunately, they've done okay in their group. They're still progressing from last year. They lost a few key guys in Costa and Felipe Luis, but they're still 3 points clear.
Yeah, they lost a lot of really, really important pieces to their team last year, but Diego Simeone, I've noticed him watching Atletico playing against Chelsea last year and watching the Champions League final. You got a sense even from that team that it was never about 1 or 2 players. Their entire team, they press and defend like madmen when they're on when they don't have the ball, and they're the kind of team that you can't say this about many of them, that they enjoy playing without the ball just as much as they enjoy playing with it. And they've bought Mario Mandzukic, who's been just as good, if not, well, I don't think he's been quite at the level of Diego Costa from last year, but I mean, he's been a very, very good replacement for him. And they should go through these last 2 games and qualify easily. So, and then from there on, it all depends on what matchups they get, and the sky's the limit for this team. I think they're a really, really good unit overall that has a chance to get maybe to the Final 4, but I'm not sure about them winning it.
Yeah, last year everything seemed to go pretty much right for them until the end. So even with the win here, they'll be seeded and have the lesser matchup next round. Getting to 8 shouldn't be a problem. Like you said with Simeone, he's got a great system. He finds the right guys who want to be there, want to play his kind of football. But losing a guy like Costa, yeah, that's a blow. Even they were able to replace him well, but that's still a step back for them, and they'll have trouble against some of the top teams in this competition.
And then Olympiacos are the surprise team of this group so far. They've got 6 points after they've beaten Atletico, they've beaten Juventus, and then they messed it all up and went and lost to Malmo. So they've been a surprise, but then the real disappointment has been Juve. But they're still in the running for that second qualification spot.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough ask of anyone who wins their group, to have to follow that up with traveling to Turin and trying to pull off a win there.
Yeah, I mean, that's one team I would not want, or I'm sure Bayern and Real and all the other big teams that know that they're going to finish in first place in their groups, they do not want to have an away trip to Turin. It's a tough team. I know they've lost Antonio Conte, but they're still a very good team with world-class players, and they're my pick right now to go through, probably in the second position behind Atletico in that group. Meanwhile, Malmo from Sweden are waiting in the wings, sitting there waiting to take advantage of whichever of those 2 middle teams slips up first. So we'll see. They won't qualify.
Yeah, I gotta think they're too far back. But yeah, I think Juventus, it just seems like it's destined to happen. They'll draw a Bayern, Leverkusen, or a Monaco and sneak their way into the round of 8. even while we were talking about them maybe being out. So
And they're Italy's only hope in Europe now. They're the only team that has showed they can consistently do well enough in the Italian league, in Serie A, and go through and have good showings and good performances in Europe. They don't necessarily get to the semifinals, the quarterfinals every year, but you know that after the first round, after the group stages, Juventus is going to be in the round of 16. They're a very, very good and tough team, but I think it shows really how much of a downturn the Italian league has taken in comparison to the German league and to comparison to the Premier League also. So
yeah, I can't say how disappointing it is to see someone like Inter go from 4 years ago, one of the top teams in the world, Champions League winners over Bayern, to now just being an afterthought even in Europa League.
Well, I'd say it's not. They had their turn. The Italian league had their turn. You know, it went through the decade of dominance of AC Milan winning 4 or 5 Champions Leagues and Inter winning one themselves with Mourinho, of course. But that team was always going to fall apart. They were built on like old pieces, and you knew it was over once they sold Balotelli. When he was 19 or 20 and just sold away their future with it. So
yeah, the Italian league's seen poor investments as well, and now people are just moving on to other things.
Group B, I thought was going to be a really, really interesting group, but has kind of been a disappointment. It's made up of Real Madrid sitting on 12 points and guaranteed qualification to the round of 16. FC Basel from Switzerland sitting on 6. Liverpool, who are a year removed from having having their own fate handed to them and messing it up and not winning the Premier League, and now all of a sudden they're struggling in the Premier League and in the Champions League. They're sitting in that group at 3rd place with 3 points. And then Ludogorets, Razgrad, who've actually had a very, very good showing. They went in and gave Liverpool a very, very close game, and I don't think they're going to qualify, but they've got to be happy with their performance. So
I mean, just how they got in even with the sub playing keeper.
Yeah, I remember thinking, oh man, if there's one game in the qualifying rounds I should have watched, it was that one. But otherwise, Real Madrid, they've looked amazing in Champions League play, and Cristiano Ronaldo has just had the best start to a season in La Liga and in the Champions League that I've seen in some time. They're really, really scary and have a very good chance of repeating.
It's too easy, but I feel the same way. I think they've in some ways gotten better as a squad than they were last year. They started off La Liga a little rough, but the team's starting to come together.
Yeah, I feared for their balance near the beginning of the year. They do have good players defensively. I've always thought ever since Mourinho benched him a couple of years ago that Iker Casillas was on the wrong side of his career and really falling apart. And they bought good replacements for him over the summer. And I've even heard of whispers that they're going to try and sign Cech during the January transfer window, which would be huge for them. And I would be happy for Cech if he moved on and went to a great team like Real Madrid and had a chance to keep winning trophies and solidifying his reputation as one of the greatest goalies of all time. But even if they don't sign him, they're pretty stacked on offense. And James Rodriguez has just been a great pickup for them. And they made that signing, and you thought, why would you spend all this money when you have a Bale, you have Ronaldo, Benzema is a above average center forward who has the potential to move out to the wings, with Ronaldo moving into the central striker role for certain plays, and you have the ability to possess and keep the ball and win it back with Modric in the middle.
Toni Kroos.
Toni Kroos has struggled near the beginning of the year with the whole holding midfielder position, but he's really come into it, I think, these last couple of weeks, and they've been putting up multiple different 4-goal wins, 5 or 6, and I've seen even them winning 8-0 in some of their La Liga matches, and that's translated perfectly over to the Champions League. that 3-0 win at Liverpool was by far the most comfortable I've seen them look against a good team all season.
We can talk about Madrid for a minute. A couple questions here. First, what do you think about all these reports now that seem to be trying to force Gareth Bale out of the way of the club? I think that's just got to be the Spanish media. I think he's fit in really well there, to be honest, just because he's hurt now and Isco's playing well. To me, that's what they bought Isco for, just to fill in when they need him.
Well, I think that's the nature of playing at a club like Real Madrid. I think they're unique in that regard, that you can be a star player in any league in the world, and Real Madrid will buy you, and you can be an afterthought one week, you can be a star the next. It's really a cycle with them. Gareth Bale, obviously near the end of last season, was in great form. Him and Ronaldo were playing well together. I think the peak was that the Champions League final was obviously the definitive peak, but I think Gareth Bale's individual peak that season came with that absolutely amazing goal against Barcelona in the Copa del Rey final. I have never seen a football player run that fast and outsprint an entire defense by himself. That was by far the most impressive solo goal from last year, from what I remember, when it comes to winning the match, scoring when it matters, and really proving a lot of people who were criticizing him wrong. So I think right now is a bad spell, a bad patch, and Real Madrid obviously has the quality players to fill in for that patch. But I think if you're going to play at your best when you're Real Madrid, you need to start with Karim Benzema in the center striker position, Cristiano out on the left, and Gareth Bale on the right. They can switch sides if they want in that 4-3-3. They can have James Rodriguez drop back into the midfield three. He's decent there, probably better served up in the top three, and he can substitute into that top three also. But those three guys who won them the Champions League last year, none of them have deteriorated. The injury sets him back a little bit, but those are the three that are going to win them trophies. You described it so well last year when you're like the hellfire that team can bring forward, and it's just really scary. So it actually, the Bayern Munich game, I was confident that Bayern were going to win that tie. That second match in Madrid, not in Madrid, in Munich, I have never seen such a good team dismantled so quickly by just absolutely the fastest counterattack I have ever seen in world football. So credit to them, but I really, really hope that Chelsea don't come up against them, and I hope that they slip up at some point in the next round somewhere. FC Basel have been a really great surprise. I mean, I don't want to sound cocky here, but they beat Chelsea twice last year, so I knew that they were no pushovers. But they've done really well. They've beaten Liverpool. They've had their experience in Europe before. Maybe I think it was 1 or 2 years in the Champions League, but they've played plenty of games in the Europa League. So it doesn't really come as too much of a surprise when you really look at it. But then Liverpool, you can't really excuse them for this kind of performance. I find it disappointing. A lot of people last year wanted to say, Liverpool doesn't have any real competitions to worry about. It bounced out early and could focus on the league. So I thought that would translate pretty well to this year all around. They lost Luis Suarez, sure, but they bought Mario Balotelli, brought him back to England. He seemed like he'd be a decent fit there, and he's been incredibly, incredibly disappointing to me. He's been getting in the right positions. He's playing decently well. He's missed some terrible opportunities in league play. He had a chance to beat Hull either this past weekend or the weekend before, and missed a sitter right in front of the goal. And when you're a striker, it's not fair, but either you score those 1 or 2 chances you get in a game, or you're considered a failure. And we saw that with Fernando Torres with Chelsea. He would miss these easy chances, but play great in link-up play, but he's still considered a failure. That's what you guys buy these guys for. Right, and I don't think Balotelli's done by any stretch of the imagination. He's always been more of a streaky player to me. He'll go on runs of form where he scores 2 or 3 goals in a game for 4 or 5 straight games. Sorry about that, but he really has the potential to win you a match by himself. And I think that can be a very, very valuable asset and against the bigger teams. So we'll see if Liverpool turns their performance around in these last two games. It's going to be difficult for them to get out of this group with only 3 points right now, and they absolutely have to win against Basel. And then Ludogorets Razgrad, they barely beat in their first game at home. They beat them on a 90th minute winner, but they'll really be pushing, and they'll probably take them a lot more seriously this time. Yeah. And I expect them to get out of this group.
They're going to need to push that goal differential. I think, unlike Pellegrini, Brendan Rodgers at least knows how to count and knows when he needed to push the goals to advance. So,
yeah, Liverpool, they've been disappointing in all competitions this year. But moving on to the group that hasn't been disappointing at all and is still wide open for all four teams to qualify is Group C. It's made up of Bayer Leverkusen from Germany sitting at the top of the group and pretty much guaranteed to go through with 9 points. And then 3 teams are left to fight for the last position, and that's Monaco with 5 points, Zenit St. Petersburg with 4 points, and then the disappointment, Benfica with 4 also. What do you think of Benfica so far?
I've been disappointed. They always find a way to get at least into the knockout stages. To go from the top-seeded team in that group to last is unfortunate. I favor of the remaining teams Zenit to go forward, but to drop a game to them by 2 goals, that's just poor on Benfica's part.
Yeah, a lot of people expected Benfica to go through and were picking them as the first place finisher in this group handily, but I really liked Bayern Leverkusen from the beginning. I wish we had done this earlier so that I could have put it out there that I liked Bayern Leverkusen because of as sexy as the full field press has become over the last couple of years when it comes to defending. Bayer Leverkusen take the full field press and they do it harder and at more of a breakneck pace than anyone I've ever seen. They press so high up the field and leave themselves dangerously open all the time to counterattacks. And at times in the Bundesliga, it definitely backfires on them. They give up easy counterattacks to lesser teams, but they more often than not, they pull it off spectacularly, and you can't hold on to the ball for longer than a second or two, even with great playmakers, and then they just have the ball back, and they're attacking you and initiating their attacks in the final third of the field. Which if you ever play soccer, when you get the ball back in the other team's defensive third, that's the most dangerous place to get the ball because the defenses at 6s and 7s, they have no idea what's going on there. They don't have their shape. And if you're at any way a moderate to good footballer, you can take advantage of that. And it's been a great strategy for them. Also fun to watch. So Bayer Leverkusen, I expect them to go through. And then another team I want to credit a lot have been Monaco, because Monaco, they'd loaned out Falcao. They lost James Rodriguez. Those were 2 guys who were pivotal to them doing so well in the league last year and getting them into the Champions League. And obviously they still have players like João Moutinho. They still have good players. But I would not think that they would be still in contention to qualify and be sitting in the second qualifying place with 2 games left to go. So all credit to them.
Yeah, this is a very interesting situation to me. Obviously, I was a little more invested in them last year, having my country's 2 best players. But we heard reports, given their owners in the most costly divorce of all time, he might start selling off players and sell off the team, but they got a good price for James. They still retain Falcao's rights. They made an interesting purchase to me last year, bringing Berbatov, which has paid some dividends. So I want to see how they go forward. If they do well in Champions League, are they going to keep investing? Or is the team just going to get sold off again?
Right. Losing an owner who just a year or something ago, whenever he bought Falcao and James Rodriguez, it looked like they were going to be the team in France to step up and challenge PSG. But this has cost them a lot. I don't think they're going to really keep challenging for the French league. I don't think they're going to keep showing up in the Champions League. But the great thing about the Champions League is anyone can win it. Anyone can go on a run in any year. So
saw Chelsea win it 2 years ago.
That's a different debate for a different time. I think we was deserved and we won it, but I mean they have the weapons to get out of this group, certainly, because this group is filled with good teams, but beatable teams. They all have their weaknesses. They all have their strengths. So it would be colossal for Monaco to go through to the next round. It would convince players around the world that they're a team to be taken seriously and really help them in the transfer market to buy the players that they do want to get to stay in this position. So it is important to do well in these games, even if you're not doing as well in league play. But a team that has used that strategy and done very well with it has been Zenit.
Yeah, I was about to say that myself. Buying Hulk, buying Axel Witsel, getting Ezekiel Garay, this transfer window out from United's nose, have been really good moves that, while costly, have paid off well for them.
Yeah, Zenit, they've lent on Hulk this entire season. He's won them matches time and time again. So it's been like Champions League years have passed and European competition have passed, where they have relied on using their big Russian oil money to spend big on
team does that sound like that we know?
I don't know. They've relied on their big Russian money to buy very specific players like Hulk and Witsel who do very specific things well. Axel Witsel covers well in the defensive midfield. Hulk is obviously a player you can dump it to him in the wing or put him at center forward. And he's always going to be a threat to get you a goal or two. And he scored some spectacular goals over the years. And it's been a good strategy for them. You're not going to lure 10 or 11 world-class players like lots of the teams in the bigger leagues. So I guess it's a good strategy to really rely on a good talent base that you have in Russia. Russia produces very, very good and serviceable footballers. But then surround them with, or not surround them, but place in a couple of stars from outside the league, like a Hulk, like a Witsel. You know, it's been a good strategy for them. I would actually favor them to come out of the group in that second spot over Monaco and also Benfica.
Me too. And I think you make a great point. We were talking about this a little bit earlier before we started recording, but good buys are so important. Having money is one thing, but you need to keep getting the right guys, and that's something that Zenit's done great. Again, with Witsel, with Hulk. Those were really costly purchases. They paid a little more over market value, but it ended up being worth it to them to lure guys like them there.
And Benfica, I know they came into this group as the favorites. I don't think you can really say there was a definitive favorite in this group, but if you had to pick one, it would be Benfica. They've played the most consistently in Europe, which is a very undervalued skill for any team. It's hard to get used to playing your league matches on weekends and all of a sudden switching and gearing up for playing a completely different style of play in Europe, whether it's in the Europa League or the Champions League. It's not an easy feat to do well consistently. And Benfica, over these past couple of years, have done well getting to 2 Europa League finals. They may have lost in them, but I really expected more from them coming into this group than they're still in contention, but they only have 4 points. So Bayern have that first spot held down, but the second qualification spot is pretty much up for grabs between Monaco, Zenit, and Benfica. I personally think Zenit are going to claim it and go through to the next round. Who do you think are going to claim it?
I think it'll be Zenit as well, but it's this next group that I'm real excited to talk about.
Yeah, it's been pretty much what you could have expected of it. It's Group D, made up of Borussia Dortmund with 12 points, who have just swept everyone out of the way, winning all 4 of their games. Arsenal, sitting in second place with 7 points, but you wouldn't think of it with all of their, honestly, somewhat terrible performances. Anderlecht are sitting in third with 2 points, and Galatasaray with 1 point in fourth place. So I guess we'll talk about Dortmund first, because they're a pretty fun team to watch and talk about. So what have you thought of Dortmund so far?
Well, I find it interesting ever since that final couple years ago against Bayern. Even though they dropped it, they thrashed Real Madrid, were everyone's favorite team. They lost a couple key guys to Bayern, but what I find really interesting is how they can be playing maybe the best soccer in Champions League and still be in the relegation zone in the Bundesliga. We know that's not going to last. They'll obviously make it clear. Klopp's not going to let that happen. But I find that so fascinating that they're about to become the first team to get relegated and win Champions League in the same year.
They're not. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination they're in contention to be relegated. Their place in the table right now obviously says that, but in every league season, it's a very, very long season, and prospects for how you're going to do change from week to week. So all it will take is them having a good result here and a good result there, and all of a sudden they'll be back in the middle of the table, and they'll be setting their eyes on trying to qualify for another Champions League spot, because every year people they seem to be the only team that even threatens or has the chance to threaten Bayern Munich to challenge for the title in Germany, but it just hasn't been the case this year.
Since this is Homer's Anonymous, I'd like to point out one of my favorite storylines there as well. With Colombian striker Adrian Ramos in spot duty in Champions League has come up with 3 goals in less than a half's worth of play, which I think is spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, people over the offseason, we've known Robert Lewandowski was going to leave for some time now, for almost a year, and people were questioning, how are you going to fill that void of losing one of the best strikers in the world and one of the best center forwards and target men, which is a dying breed in the game now. And I've been really, really impressed. They've bought, obviously, Adrian Ramos has done well. Prince Aubameyang has done very, very well. He scored a couple of great goals against Arsenal, and he's done well in more of a. He's not in the same mold of a Robert Lewandowski. He's more of a. He reminds me more of like a Loic Remy or a Nicolas Anelka kind of forward, but he'll play on the back shoulder of your center back, and then he'll run in on a through ball. So he needs some space to run in and really have one-on-one chances with the goalkeeper. But he has been good in that functionality this year. And then the final one, I was really, really excited to watch and really impressed with in that first game when they played Arsenal, was Ciro Immobile. Led the Italian league in scoring last year. He's only about 20 or 21. He got a chance to go to the World Cup this summer, but didn't get much playing time because they do have plenty of good forwards in Italy, and they kind of viewed him as a bit too young to really be their go-to guy at such a big stage. I don't think any of those 3 guys are consistent enough to start every single match for you, but it's good knowing that they have 3 forwards that have the potential to win them a game. They can pick 2 of those 3, throw them in there against any team in Europe, and they know they have a chance to get 2 or 3 goals against them, along with that midfield led by Reus.
Yeah, there's a reason that Dortmund's always in this position. Despite having limited financial resources, they buy well, they're managed well, they play well, and as long as they got those 3 things going for them, they can compete with some of the bigger boys in this competition.
And I played up Leverkusen's press earlier, and I wouldn't quite equate Dortmund to Leverkusen, but they do press extremely well, and that's a really big reason for their success, because they win the ball in very, really dangerous areas, and you can see every time they do win the ball, every one of their players looks up and immediately spots out either Marco Reus or Shinji Kagawa, depending on who's playing and the position of the field that they win it in. So, and when you give the players like a Reus or a Kagawa the ball in the attacking third, when the defense is confused and out of position like that they can absolutely just like work wonders in attack. And it's been a pleasure to watch so far. So I look forward to seeing them in the next round. I think they're a dangerous team, and actually maybe even a dark horse team to go on and get to the Final Four of the tournament. So for as great as Dortmund have been, and as impressive as they have been, Arsenal to me have been pretty lousy. They may have 7 points, but it's been the least convincing 7 points of any of the champions of these teams in the Champions League this year.
So how about that 2-point drop into Anderlecht?
Oh,
yeah, that nothing lead at home.
They that game pretty much just sums up Arsenal's season so far. And the past couple of years, they've always had great attacking talent. They're a joy to watch going forward. They possess the ball beautifully. They create beautiful chances in any phase of the field. They can play from the wings into like even through the middle. So they're always a danger. You don't know where the attack is going to come from. But that entire 90 minutes was summed up by their defense just completely falling apart. And you have to feel for them. They're starting Nacho Monreal back there at a center back, which is just, you can just tell, the injuries have destroyed them again this season. They seem to disregard every year the fact that they are thin at center back. They have good quality center backs when they start the year. But I don't understand, if you know you're a top class team or a top tier team in the Premier League, why wouldn't you go out and buy more center back cover?
I don't want to linger on Arsenal too much because we have our Premier League preview coming too.
Yeah.
And there's so many flaws to pick away. I think you mentioned a lot of good ones, including reluctance to accept who they are and to change. I think the one really nice thing they have going for them right now is Alexis Sanchez, who's gone beast on everyone. But short of that, they have a lot of things they need to fix. Speaking of Arsenal, though, how about some credit to Anderlecht, who came back from down 3 goals to tie it up yesterday and salvage a point?
I mean, even in the first half of that game, Arsenal, they were up 2-0 at halftime. They got their third in the 57th or 58th minute. But even throughout that first half, Anderlecht were threatening. They were threatening on the counterattack. They had decent players. They have a Belgian international at right back who scored 2 goals for them, and Anthony van den Boer, who's a very, very quality player, and that proved to help them. They're not a terrible team, but I think this group is over. 7 points with 2 games to play, as opposed to Anderlecht's 2. I don't see Arsenal throwing away this lead. So for Anderlecht and Galatasaray with 1 point, I just don't see them taking advantage of any Arsenal slip-ups.
This one's a wrap. They could have clinched it with a win yesterday, but they'll still be fine. 1 point even will.
Galatasaray were actually a team that I expected a lot more out of. I didn't expect them to have lost 3 games and only drawn 1 by this point of the group stage. I thought they would at least give Arsenal a run for their money, but it just hasn't proven to be that way. So
we're used to seeing them in the knockout stages. This is a disappointment for them.
So moving on to the group of death, Group E has been an absolute bloodbath for one of the best teams on the continent. It's made up of Bayern Munich, sitting in first place with 12 points and won all of their games. Roma have 4 points, and they're sitting in second. CSKA Moscow, after an impressive win today, sitting in 4 points. And the losers of that game today, Man City, are sitting at 2 points in the last place. These 3 teams just really need to take these next 2 games seriously, as if they're winner go home. So,
well, in effect, they are.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, who do they play in these next games?
Well, City has Roma and Bayern left, which are going to be 2 tough matchups.
Yeah, both those games are on the road, aren't they?
Bayern.
The Roma game is on the road. The Bayern game is at home. And Bayern, they may be lucky. Bayern may have already wrapped up. I mean, they have already wrapped up the group, but they're going to wrap up first place, and they may play all of their subs, and City may get an easy win out of that one. But
you can only hope so. Even a B squad from Bayern is still threatening and hungry.
Very true.
City's become so complacent. You never know what you're going to get out of them.
What do you think of Bayern's performance so far?
I think they've been amazing as expected. I'd be disappointed with anything else than a run to the semifinals. They have depth to cover for any injuries or play any shape they want against any team. And they've shown last year, we were all disappointed how they dropped their tie to Real Madrid. I think most people favored them actually to take that one. That's how much of a powerhouse they've become. We thought they'd be the team to repeat as Champions League winners.
Yeah, they're a team that it's year 2 of the Pep Guardiola reign there. It's one more year into really latching on to his style of play, which is not usually a style of play that Germans in German teams have ever really even flirted with before. So I was always skeptical when they hired Pep Guardiola as to how the German players were going to adapt to Pep's style of play and not push. German style of play is very, very straightforward. It's very to the point. All the passes are very positive. There's not much like dilly dallying on the ball. You get the ball, you look up, you play. It's what my dad calls Route 1 football. You pick out who's the player who has the best chance to score, and you try and get it to him in the best position you can. Pep Guardiola's style is nowhere near to that. It's all based on patience. It's all based on possession. If you've watched him, any of his teams play, you know that. It gets to the point, or it got to the point back at Barcelona, where it became boring at times to watch them. Some people say that's the most beautiful style of play. I don't really agree. And it all culminated in them absolutely crushing Roma like Roma tomatoes. Begging me to make that pun there. But that 7-1 win, I was busy watching the Chelsea match during the same time as they were playing. But to look down at halftime and see Bayern Munich against Roma nonetheless, up 5-0, Robin was skinning them down the sidelines, cutting in, and he's playing some of the best football I've ever seen him play. Obviously, Haaland exceeded everyone's expectations at the World Cup this year, and he's really carried over his performance at that World Cup into league play with Bayern, and that 3 or 4 goal performance he had against Roma was just an absolute pleasure to watch.
Well, that's what you get with a team like Bayern. When they're at their best, they're a fully operational battle station that can just crush any other team in the dust. And Roma is one of the world's best teams. One of the best 10 teams probably in the world, if not maybe top 15. And they... I don't know. Disagree. They absolutely destroyed them. This is a team that could easily win the group maybe of the 3 remaining teams that are left. That remains to be seen. But this is a team that's beaten Manchester City. To crush a team like that 7-1, a team that's second in Serie A right now, that's just amazing to me.
Yeah, Roma, I agree with you. Roma are a very, very good team. Bayern it's not that much of a surprise when you consider the fact that Bayern did just buy Roma's best defender, Mehdi Benatia, from them at the very end of the transfer window. And he was a player that I heard linked with Man United. I heard him linked with Chelsea even though we don't even need him. He's a world-class center back, and he's good on the ball. He presents an attacking threat to them on set pieces. So losing him was going to be a big deal for Roma. And it really culminated, like I said, with that 7-1 crushing. So it's not too much of a surprise that a great team like Bayern beat a team that's still reeling from losing a player like Benatia. But I never thought they'd beat them 7-1. And then CSKA Moscow. Last week or a week ago, earlier today, you wouldn't have even thought of them as a team that could still come out of this group. But after a win at Manchester City today, I really think they have a chance if they play well defensively. That's always been CSKA's one weakness, is just defending and maintaining a good shape. But they have good attacking players. They have Seydou Doumbia, who's never really had the chance to shine on a world stage, so people don't really know much about him. But he enjoyed a very good game today, scored 2 goals, 2 very well-taken goals against Man City. And he's one of the players that if you do play a lot of FIFA and you do play with Ivory Coast or play with CSKA Moscow, he's a good player who can go out and win you matches. They also have Ahmed Musa, who put on a very good show for Nigeria this summer at the World Cup. So they have good attacking players. They just need to make sure they maintain their shape against teams that, like Man City, like Bayern, have a much more talent than them. And they just need to try and grind out results like a 0-0 draw or a 1-1 draw against these teams, and I could see them going through.
I still think it's Roma's to lose, though I get your argument. Though they looked like a great squad today, beating City, unfortunately. City just plays dumb in Champions League. I think we were talking about that earlier, that they refuse to adjust their game to fit the circumstances.
Yeah, the big point I made, which I kind of hinted at with Benfica, is when you're playing in the Champions League, there are some teams that it's a big mental block between doing well in your domestic league and drawing out win after win after win every week in the domestic league, but then after that, just switching your mindset immediately for teams in Europe that play very, very different styles of play compared to the Premier League. We saw today Yaya Toure and Fernandinho get sent off for stupid fouls and stupid red cards that like really could have been avoided, and you just cannot play that physically in Europe like compared to the Premier League. The Premier League is a much higher tempo league. You're at risk to have your leg broken every time you touch the ball, and you need to dial that down a bit when you come to Europe, because you're going to have more time on the ball. Certain teams may press you more, but for the most part in Europe, when you're playing against these Portuguese and these Spanish teams and these Italian teams, you can pick up the ball and you can take one or two or even three touches and pick out like a wide open player. And that's just not going to happen in the Premier League. So obviously, Man City over these last couple of years have really struggled with changing that mindset when they've come to Europe. But they've also they've had pretty bad luck with these groups. They've had Bayern these last 2 years, right?
City keeps getting drawn into awful groups with Dortmund too before. But like you said, its mindset is so key. We saw it this weekend in the Manchester Derby with Chris Smalling getting himself thrown out of the game over two stupid incidents, which is fine for someone like Chris Smalling. But to see Yaya Toure get himself tossed from a game where he already had a goal, where his team needed him for an important home result, that's just poor.
Yeah, I mean, even a draw for them would have been fine at home. 1-1, I don't think CSKA had gone ahead yet. And he's one of your leaders on the team. He's a force in the middle of the pitch. Like, I don't think CSKA really had anyone to answer for him. He's the kind of player that can affect all facets of the game. So if you had tied that game 1-1, CSKA are left with 2 points, and you're left with 3, and you have a chance. You still get to play Roma, and you can go ahead of them. And you have a much better chance of coming out of this group. And I just don't see it happening anymore. I think Roma are the favorites to get that second spot now.
Yeah, even with the draw, that game against City to me is the biggest game left in that group. I think Roma escaped that with a draw at worst, and they're good. A win, and they're pretty much in.
Roma did really well to get the result they did against Man City in that first match. Having Francesco Totti dial back the years and have a game-winning goal against them at the Etihad was a pleasure to watch. I know you obviously enjoy it, but I mean he's one of those players that I grew up watching, and he's a kind of guy who's just been so consistent. And if you weren't paying attention to the Serie A the last couple of years, you would have thought he would have retired by now, but he's still churning out.
His game is ageless.
Yeah, he's still churning out good quality games every week for Roma. And I mean, you just got to really enjoy this while it lasts, because after this season, I mean, he may come back and prove me wrong, but after this season, his Champions League games are probably going to come to an end. So moving on to Group F. This is a group that was pretty much sealed from the time they drew each of these groups, and it's gone according to plan. It's made up of Paris Saint-Germain in first place with 10 points, Barcelona in second place with 9 points, Ajax with 2 points, and APOEL Nicosia from Cyprus with 1 point. So I think the only real conversation to have in this one is who do you think have been better, Paris or Barcelona? And obviously the points point to PSG, but obviously Barcelona boasts one of the best players in the world and the past success.
It's so hard to bet against Barca in this competition. I was about to say that as well. They have the experience. They've been here before. So them finishing in second in this group doesn't mean much. I feel like they'd be comfortable pretty much facing anyone else seated at number 1. They wouldn't think of themselves as underdogs. They've got Messi playing well. They've got Suarez still finding his way into the squad. They're only going to get better from here.
Yeah, I agree with you. The only way they can go is really up. I know it's a couple of weeks into the season, but watching a Clasico a couple of weeks ago, you still felt that their defense wasn't quite set. I think the best asset a world-class defense can have is a consistent, familiar back four.
It's still so strange seeing them without Puyol.
Yeah, I mean, he was always a great stopper, very aggressive sort of ball-playing center back for them. And PK has kind of had to adjust his game to make up for that, and they've even plugged in Javier Mascherano back there to play, and he's been serviceable. But I think PK's best position as a center back is more of a deep lying sweeper who kind of acts as the last line of defense. So if one of these guys they've bought, like a Jeremy Mathieu, can slip into the middle, or Thomas Vermaelen can slip into the middle and play more of that stopper role, and they get more and more game time as the season goes on together, I could really see this defense being like pretty much at the same level it was back in 2008 and 2009. They have the talent now that they've spent the money on to do that, but you just need to see them gain the consistency and the familiarity and the continuity to do it.
It's really interesting to see Barca in somewhat of a transition stage for them. Usually they have their guys coming up from the academy and they'll buy the pieces they need. So to see now next year, Dani Alves might not be there anymore, Xavi might not be there anymore. Those are going to be two guys they've had for quite a while, especially with Xavi getting replaced.
I've heard rumors that Dani Alves is absolutely leaving next year, and he wants to go and play in the Premier League. So he's been one of the best right backs in the world for the last 5 or 6 years. So obviously that's a big piece for them to replace. But I don't think it's beyond them to do it.
They have the resources and they have the scouting and the academy. We know they'll be fine.
Yeah, and plus when you're playing for Barcelona, you're playing as a defender for Barcelona. I think one of the traits that is most required when you're playing for Barcelona as a center back, right back, left back, it doesn't matter. You have to be very, very good on the ball. You have to be a very solid attacking player with confidence on the ball and with an eye to look up and make a pass. Because when you're playing for Barcelona, you're not going to be sitting back there and absorbing pressure for 60 or 70 minutes of a game. You're hardly going to have to defend that much when you're playing for them. You'll have maybe 4 or 5 possessions where your defense is truly like threatened to give up a goal. And as long as you can make the right play and you may have the right decision making, all you have to do is become a passable attacker and do the job of getting the ball into the playmakers' feet that they do have, and you're going to be a success there. So the thing that I've really enjoyed watching about them this year has been that midfield. I think the most underrated buy of the offseason was Ivan Rakitic when they bought him from Sevilla. He was phenomenal for Croatia during the World Cup. I know they didn't go through in their group, but I always thought he was the most underrated player as a holding midfielder and as a defensive midfielder, and he's carried it over with them very well. He's allowed Xavi and Iniesta to not have to worry so much. He's kind of like harkening back to the days when Yaya Toure was a defensive midfielder for them.
Yeah, I mean, Rakitic right now, he has the highest passing completion percentage on Barca in the league even. So.
Yeah, and his effect can't really be summed up by statistics. He's the kind of guy that you really need to watch the matches. You need to see him play off the ball, look at his positioning. He's the kind of player that goes beyond statistics. So you really need to watch the matches. You need to look at his positioning even when he's not playing on the ball, and you can really notice that he has a really great effect on that team, similar to, like I said, Yaya Toure's effect 4 or 5 years ago. So Barcelona, they're still in the running for that first place. They get to play PSG again before this group stage is over, and they'll definitely be wanting to win that so they can get the first place in this group.
That'll be an interesting match. I think PSG will probably be playing for the draw at that point just to hold off and win.
Yeah, but Barcelona, they're the kind of team that you can't play for a draw.
Absolutely. They were down 2-0 and they're tied to PSG last time and came back and won that.
Right. That was by far the best game of of the group stage so far. That was a great game to watch. I really enjoyed watching it. And PSG, they're my pick to actually get to the Final Four this year. I say the Final Four like it's from basketball, but I think they have. I know David Luiz has had some bad performances in the World Cup, and people have criticized him for the $50 million that they spent signing him and everything. But he's really the kind of player that, together with Thiago Silva, can form a very, very formidable defense.
I think they complement each other very well.
Yeah. David Luiz has put those bad positional performances behind him from the past. As a Chelsea fan, my one pick on his game that I just really, really didn't like was he just got out of position way too much. You'd see him flying up the field, trying to make challenges at the center circle, and I would just scream at the television, "Get back in position!" And he seems to have put that behind him. So
that's one of those things you get with a guy like him, though. He'll make you some plays, and yeah, he'll cost you sometimes. But we saw his goal line clearance against Ajax, which was really nice.
Right.
Saved him a couple
and
points.
He scored a very important goal against Barca. So he's the kind of player that he comes with some weaknesses, but a lot of the pros outweigh the cons with him. So I think that back two will really propel them in this Champions League. I think they've got a solid midfield spine with Blaise Matuidi and one
of the most underrated players in the world.
Yeah, I know. I was hoping Chelsea would try and sign him instead of Paul Pogba as one of our defensive midfielders, and either of them I'd be fine with. But yeah, he's an absolutely outstanding player, and they've managed to not miss a beat even without Zlatan Ibrahimovic.
Cavani's been great for them in Champions League.
Yeah, so I mean, I really like this team. But at the same time, you wouldn't be surprised if they went into Camp Nou and they just got absolutely blown out by Barcelona, because Barcelona do tend to change the gears at home and really, really put on good performances.
Experience matters so much in Champions League. That's why we keep seeing the same four clubs in the Final Four, as you like to call it. And eventually, that's something a team like PSG can do. Maybe they can break through this year, like you're predicting. And once they get there, it'll be a lot easier. But for now, that's why it's so easy for me to take Barca over them.
So Ajax and APOEL are two teams that have 2 and 1 points respectively. They weren't ever really hoping to qualify out of this group. I think we all knew that. But they're just two teams that have just really enjoyed the experience of being here in the Champions League and going and playing big European nights at the Camp Nou and at the Parc des Princes. And so they're two teams that aren't going to be overly disappointed with not getting out of the group stage.
Yeah, APOEL, they made it all the way to the quarterfinals 2.5 years ago, which was great for them until they ran into Real Madrid. But that was just a big break for them. We couldn't expect them to build on that, at least anywhere near this quickly.
In a group like this,
this is not a disappointment for them at all. It's a tough group and great to get even a point out of them.
Right. So moving on to Group G, it's been a fairly more open group than people were expecting, but it's made up of the greatest team in the world and the pride of London, Chelsea Football Club, sitting in first place right now with 8 points after today's disappointing draw with Maribor. We've got Schalke from Germany, who have 5 points. Sporting Lisbon with 4 points. And like I said, Maribor from Slovenia with 3 points. So those three teams in the bottom there are all competing for that one position once again. I guess Chelsea haven't technically gone through yet, but with still a home match against Sporting Lisbon to play and an away game against Schalke, a team that we've consistently done well against over the years, I think our position as in first place is all but assured.
Yeah, it's a formality at this point. And Chelsea have been here before. They definitely are one of those teams we were talking about, have the experience. I'd be disappointed if they didn't make it at least to the quarters, having a really tough draw.
Well, you'd think a team that got all the way to the semifinals last year, it was a surprise to some people, but I mean, like you said, we're a very experienced team, and you'd think this team that has only been built on since last year, we've added obviously Diego Costa and Cesc Fabregas and Thibaut Courtois and Felipe Luis, who played in the Champions League final last year, you'd think that we would be running over everyone in our path in a group like this. But I think this year, Mourinho and everyone at the club has definitively set their sights on retaining the Premier League trophy. I don't think they want to disrespect anyone in this group by saying that they're not or not take any of them seriously. So they have been playing strong lineups against them, but it's very obvious watching Chelsea that they're not playing with the same sort of sense of urgency as they have had in the Premier League. They've been killing games off much earlier in the Premier League. They've been getting like 1 or 2 goal leads and not taking their foot off the gas in the Premier League. Meanwhile, in the Champions League, we've gone up 1-0 multiple times and failed to really keep pressuring the opponents that are, in most cases, a lot worse than the Premier League opposition we've faced. So that's something that I think will survive in the group stages, but they're really going to have to become accustomed to just putting their foot down and running up those 2 or 3 goal leads, because in the knockout stages, that's really what you need to do to kill off ties early.
Well, I certainly agree with you. It seems their target this year is the Premier League, which is something you'd have to favor them for now, barring anything disastrous. They already added some to their title experience by buying half of Athletico Madrid, which wasn't a bad move for them.
Well, it was the good half. It was their 3 players. Well, no, we only bought 2 players
2.5.
technically,
Yeah.
seeing as we owned Thibaut Courtois all along.
Even bringing Courtois back was a big move for them. You have to consider this is a guy who might have set his sight on even higher ambitions after a long stay at Atletico.
Well, I don't think you can get much higher than going to Chelsea and being the number 1 goalie at Chelsea. So
I think a crosstown move wouldn't fit him badly either at Madrid, but that's just me.
No, I mean, as much as people, the media played up a lot of times the idea of Courtois having a bad relationship with Mourinho or having a bad relationship with the club in general, because we loaned him out to Atletico 3 years ago and there hasn't been much contact apart from that Champions League draw a couple of years last year.
I think that was so interesting, that storyline of is he going to play, is he not going to play? I think Chelsea, of course, wanted him to get that experience, even if it was against them. That's something that helps the team so much more in the long run, and he's going to be a keeper there for a long time, already arguably the best keeper in the world.
He is, in fact, the best keeper in the world. As a person who watches as much football as I do, and as much Chelsea as I do, the last time I saw a keeper this good was Petr Cech the year before he got his head injury. Cech has never quite been the same since that injury. He's not quite as
Aerially.
Yeah, his positioning has always been world class. His shot stopping has always been top tier. But going for crosses and going for anything in the air now, you can see just a slight bit of hesitancy a majority of the times he goes for any of those crosses, which as a goalkeeper, you just can't have. Meanwhile, Thibaut Courtois has shown at young age of 21 or 22, or whatever he is, that he's just the most confident young goalkeeper I've ever seen.
It's something Chelsea does so well. They loan out their young players for either just the right amount of experience or end up selling them if they don't fit in for the right amount of money. And they're just going to keep doing that. Courtois was a perfect example of why Chelsea manages to keep growing as a club and retaining the best players they can while selling off what they don't need for profit.
I mean, I could spend a whole podcast, a whole individual podcast talking about this, but that was one of the ways that Chelsea decided they were going to react to financial fair play regulations. They decided we're going to really invest a lot of our scouting in finding these good young players, buying them around 16 or 17 or 18, and then immediately loaning to very good places for them all over world football so that they could grow and develop and eventually either break into the first team or be sold for a profit.
Which is Chelsea's farm team again? You mentioned
Vitesse Arnhem, yeah. They haven't quite produced the star. They're not really our farm team. They're more of a very close association just over the English Channel. But, we loan 2 or 3 players to them every year, and they get valuable experience from that. So it's a beneficial relationship to both, because Vitesse have had some of their best seasons the last couple of years.
Who was the guy on Ghana that we really liked for Chelsea?
Christian Atsu.
Thank you. That's someone to keep your eye on.
He's had a pretty disappointing start to his loan spell at Everton so far, but they already have some very good attacking weapons. Kevin Morales plays in his position, and Stephen Naismith has been playing very well in sort of an attacking midfielder, number 10 role right behind the striker. So I hope Christian Atsu gets the chance to break into a team like Everton, because he definitely has the skill to. And I know he frustrated a lot of fans like you who thought you'd found the next big African star, only to realize he plays for Chelsea.
One of the most disappointing wiki experiences.
Yeah. You're thinking, wow, maybe we can sign him from whatever Dutch team.
I enjoyed the Vitesse line for 2 seconds until I read on loan from Chelsea, and I realized it was over.
Yep. So Chelsea pretty much have this group wrapped up. We may fall to second if we really disappoint in these next 2 games, but I don't expect us to after a wake up kind of performance against Maribor. I think Mourinho's really going to whip everyone into shape for these last 2 games, because he knows that we need to finish first in the group. So Schalke have been somewhat disappointing also. I thought they were going to blow Sporting Lisbon out of the water, but they had a very disappointing 3-1 loss today where they pretty much just fell apart defensively. But either them or Sporting Lisbon have got to be the favorites to get that second spot.
Schalke's been here before. They usually find a way to make it to the knockout stage.
And then probably lose.
And lose immediately, much like a Galatasaray, but they usually find a way to get there. And I still favor them over Sporting.
And they just hired Roberto Di Matteo.
Champions League winner?
Yeah, Champions League winner and one of Chelsea's favorite sons. They've just recently hired him as manager for the rest of this season. I think that was a great appointment by them. He's a very, very patient, intelligent manager. His style of play doesn't typically favor what you would associate with a German team like Schalke, but I mean he did well in the first game that they played against Sporting, that they managed to win right at the end with a very, very lucky penalty, let's say. But I wouldn't be surprised if he managed to get a draw at home against Chelsea in that last game and sneak through to the next round.
That's going to be a big game for him. I think, like you were saying, with Chelsea, they played today against Maribor. That's a team to me that's interesting. I know very little about them. To pull off 3 draws, 1 against each of these teams, is still a nice result for them.
Yeah, and I by no means think they're going to get through in this group. I think they're still probably going to lose 1 more of these games, which will all but knock them out of the group stage. But every single game I've seen them play, even the 6-0 loss at Stamford Bridge, they're a team that they don't play like they're down 6-0. They play like they have a chance, or they really want to win the ball back. They want to score. They play like there's no tomorrow. Which is kind of a cliche, kind of a lame thing to say, that like, oh, they play with a great heart. But Maribor, more than any of these other Slovenian and teams from Cyprus or anything like that, they play very hard and they never give up. Which I'm just gonna take the shame that comes my way for saying that.
Well, you love to see that, though. That's one of the best parts of Champions League. Even the smaller squads playing for a positive result with exposure. That's we find a lot of hidden gems of players that way.
Right.
These guys going all out because they want to win no matter what the score is, like you said. So speaking of another group, this one with a few less heavyweights, shall we say. We got Group H, with Porto sitting at 10 points, comfortably having clinched. Shaktar Donetsk, always a threat at 8 points. Bate at 3. And surprisingly, Europa League winners from a couple seasons ago, Bilbao at 1 point.
Yeah, it's been a really disappointing campaign for them. And even for Bate Borisov, who've spent these last 2 games playing against a Shaktar team that has just absolutely blown them out of the water. Much of Shakhtar's 14 goals forced have come against Bate, which, Shakhtar are a great team, but I feel like any team that is good enough to qualify for the Champions League should not have 2 straight games where they give up 5 or 6 goals to one opponent. So
and to a shutout, no less.
Yeah, it's been a disappointing. It's been a disappointing campaign for Bate. Athletic Bilbao, I expected to do much better than they. I expected them to finish in the top 2.
They're a team I expected to advance as well. Yeah.
I mean, they're a lot like Benfica in that they've had Champions League success before. And Europa League success also. They've proven that they can handle the mental aspect of playing your league matches on a Saturday or Sunday and flipping the switch and coming with the same sort of intensity or even a change in intensity necessary to do well in Europe on the Tuesday or Wednesday. But they've sold a lot of their best players this past summer. They sold Ander Herrera to Man United, which I obviously shows just how much of an impact he made to that team when it came to the center of the park, winning the ball back, looking up, playing good balls forward to the wing or to his
made an instant impact
forwards
on that team.
So, I mean, maybe Athletic Bilbao fans saw it coming. Maybe they knew how good of a player he was, but nevertheless, it's been a disappointing campaign. But for Porto, it's been pretty phenomenal. They've swept away pretty much everyone in their path, apart from the one draw they had against Shaktar, which wasn't a great game in itself, 2-2. 2 very good at possession and attacking sides went at it and gave us one of the best 2 or 3 games in the group stage so far.
Porto is another team I'm interested in because they got 2 high-profile Colombians. One being Juan Fernando Quintero. He's young. He was one of the best players in the Sub-20 World Cup, but I don't know how much better he can get. But how about Jackson Martinez, looking like a real striker up top?
Yeah, I mean, he's a lot like Robert Lewandowski, one of those dying breed of big, strong, powerful target men who can play center forward and drop back also and pick up the ball at the 18-yard box or 20 yards away from the goal and make a good pass or lay off for one of their attacking midfielders. Jackson Martinez has always been the player that I've been really impressed by, and someone that I really hope Chelsea get their act together and sign sometime over the next couple months.
Yeah, I can't see him playing at Porto too much longer. Porto does this really well too. They scout South America incredibly, buy guys at really low fees, and turn around and spin them for huge profits. That's how they survive and manage to keep playing at a high level. They find players all over, and they manage to bring them to Champions League success. So even if they lose Jackson Martinez, it's just a matter of time until they find their next guy.
Right, exactly. So I would that group's pretty much.
Shakhtar is going to get that second spot.
Shaktar has the second spot. They've got 8 points. Bate have 3 points, and they still have to play Porto again. So
Shaktar with 1 goal even will have a 30 goal, or 1 point will have a 30 goal differential.
Oh,
they can just rest.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
So do you want to pick maybe our picks to win the Champions League?
Yeah, I will go with the first repeating champion.
Really?
In Real Madrid.
Okay.
To me, they showed they could do it last year. They have most of the same team back, plus a nice piece in James, who's fit in well this early. They're playing this well without Gareth Bale even with the Casillas Navas dilemma at the back. I think they'll win. Yeah.
I'm kind of torn because the team that I really, really like, and I'm sure a lot of other people like, is Bayern Munich. But they've sustained some very, very difficult injuries so far. I'm not too sure about that defense. The injury of Javi Martinez 2 or 3 weeks into the season was a really, really big blow to them. They've recovered obviously well. They had, like we said, the huge 7-1 game against Roma, which shows that they can still absolutely dominate very, very high quality sides on any given day. But this competition is based so much on matchups. Barcelona notoriously done terribly against Chelsea. So if Barcelona drew Chelsea, that would obviously really, really hurt their chances of doing well in this competition. So, I mean, Bayern, this competition is based so much on matchups that Bayern could draw Real Madrid even in the quarterfinals again, and that could throw a wrench in their Champions League ambitions. Like, the matchups really do matter, and we saw it 2 years ago when Dortmund absolutely dismantled Real Madrid, home and away. It was nowhere near close, and Bayern did the same to Barcelona. The style of play that the German league was engaged in at that time really gave Spanish opposition a whole lot of trouble. And obviously Real Madrid showed last year that they can adapt and learn to counter that sort of pressing, high tempo style that a lot of the German teams were playing. So, it's going to be really interesting to see these matchups unfold. I really hope that Chelsea can get through and hopefully win it. But I think our main focus, like I said before, is the Premier League. We're very committed to that. So I wouldn't be surprised or disappointed if we lost somewhere in the quarterfinals or the semifinals.
So I hate to toss around this term in something like the Champions League where every team is a heavyweight, but who would you like as your dark horse in this tournament?
We've talked a lot about teams that do well with the mental side of and the intangible side of playing games on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and then going back and playing your league matches, your domestic league matches on a Saturday or Sunday. And one team that hasn't really got anything going for it in the Bundesliga this year and is pretty much just looking to try and qualify once again for the Champions League so it can afford to really throw all of its effort and throw all of its commitment into the Champions League is Borussia Dortmund. I've been very impressed with their performances against Arsenal so far, and Galatasaray and Anderlecht, who by no means are bad teams. These are not teams on the same level as like a Maribor or a Malmo or Ludogorets Razgrad. These are very good, established European teams, and they've swept them aside easily. So I would probably have to pick Borussia Dortmund if you wanted me to pick a dark horse team.
Well, I'll take another recent Champions League runner-up then. I like Athletico de Madrid. Like you said, Simeone is so key to that team. He's the reason they can have turnover like they did last year. Lose the best keeper in the world. Lose their striker, who was so effective for them, who helped them win the league. Lose Felipe Luis and march forward. With Koke and Mario Mandzukic, you're looking at two guys who have been so deep in this competition before. Mandzukic winning it with Bayern. These are guys who have been here before, can step up against big teams, aren't intimidated at all. This is a well-coached team, so strong defensively, and one that can still go forward when needed. I think if you have to take a dark horse, it's got to be Atletico Madrid.
Well, I'm looking forward to the last two games of this group stage, and I'll obviously look forward to the rounds coming up in February and March. They always produce some of the most exciting football of the season. So from us here at Homers Anonymous, thanks for listening.